Good evening, everyone. My name is Alan Smason, and welcome to NOLA Theatre Talk. This is a weekly set of broadcasts. We broadcast on Mondays and on Fridays. This is always broadcast to the NOLA Theatre Folk Facebook group and also to the theatrecriticism.com Facebook page. Our guest tonight is going to be a very interesting guest, Michael Mitchell. Now, we, of course, usually have things well in hand, everything working great. I had everything lined up, and then I realized that the broadcast was lined up for broadcast record only purposes and not to live stream. So I just sent Michael a new link asking him to use that, and hopefully he'll get the message that we are going to talk about the New Orleans Theater Association with him tonight. Michael is the man who has been running it, and as soon as he gets here, we'll be able to talk to him. I apologize. What had happened was we were ready to go, and I realized it was in a record mode and not in a live stream mode. So I'm hoping that I can get a hold of him to inform him that he needs to come in. In the meantime, we also have a very interesting guest who will be joining Michael a little bit later, and that we'll be talking about being the beneficiary of the largesse of Michael's foundation, the New Orleans Theater Association. I will give you a little bit of background in so far as how long I've known about the New Orleans Theater Association. They started out back in the 1980s, and Michael, once he joins us, will be able to fill us in a little bit about that. Essentially, what I wanted to do with him was to go over a little bit of the history. It was founded in 1984, and he joined the New Orleans Theater Association sometime shortly thereafter. And he really became involved more readily in 1997. Many people will recognize the logo, if you will, the brand for the New Orleans Theater Association as that little figure that we see in the upper right-hand corner now. Those of you who are familiar with that may have seen it on different banners, etc. You may actually also have seen it in terms of on certain particular flyers, or perhaps some other types of advertisements telling you that this is part of the New Orleans Theater Association, or that somebody has been the beneficiary of a grant from the New Orleans Theater Association. Again, the NOTA, if you'd like, or New Orleans Theater Association, founded in '84. And Michael became involved in 1997. Many people will recognize that they are most noted as the local presenters of the Broadway series at the Sanger. I'm going to just check with Michael real quick to see if I can still find his stream where he was, and advise him perhaps to get over to where we are so that we can get him started. Again, please bear with me just for a little bit. We'll hopefully have this all together very soon. And I guess this was just a overreaction on my part not to be able to get this a little bit better organized. I'm sorry about that. Let me see if I can get him to enter the studio for us. Yeah, let me make sure. Michael, can you hear me? Can you hear me now? All right. So I need you to go to your email and click on a new link. Okay. Yeah, because this one's not broadcasting. The next, just click on the new link, come in the room, and I'll put you in there right away. Okay. All right. Very good. All right. So that takes care of that. He is now on his way and should be here any moment. And again, I apologize for the holdup there. We hopefully will have him in any moment now. Again, they present the Broadway series, The Sanger. And of course, you know, this includes everything from Wicked to Hamilton to all of the national tours, everything from Once to Elf, to Dirty Dancing, and well, here he is now. Michael, sorry about the hold up. Again, you can see in the upper right hand corner, as I was mentioning, there's your banner. And again, we talked a little bit about who you are, and also the New Orleans Theater Association. I've been talking and ad-libbing a little bit while you were on your way in. And again, welcome to NOLA Theatre Talk. We appreciate you being here with us tonight. As I was saying, you're the sort of the local presenter for the Broadway series of the Sanger. Now, again, there's a lot of different people who help present the Sanger Theater series aside from you, aren't there? I mean, there's the people with their hands, if you will, involved in terms of managing the facilities, and then there's you, and then occasionally, I mean, I see some other people like the Whitney and other people who also help fund some of that as well, don't they? There's like the East Jefferson.
They do. And, exactly. They fall into the category of sponsors or supporters of the series. And obviously we're not the producers or anything like that. As the local presenter, we sort of liaison between the Sanger management and its workforce. We sign some of the contracts, those sorts of things.
Right.
It's a important role, but it's a small role compared to what other people do.
So again, when people are looking to you, a lot of times they're looking to you for grants. They're looking to you for some help and you don't just do theater. That's one of the things that we're going to talk about tonight. I mean, it's called the New Orleans Theater Association, and maybe you could talk a little bit about how the present foundation is different from the original structure of what was founded in 1984. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Sure, a little bit. In 1984, it was founded as the Civic Light Opera, and we had the same sort of a role at that time. And what we were doing was channeling the income stream that we got from the Sanger for performing those services into a variety of charitable events. And we got into the business for a while of putting on our own summer camp program in the arts. That really wasn't very satisfying for us because we weren't necessarily geared for that. Other people were doing it better. It cost a lot of money. It took a lot of time. We had to get insurance, all of those sorts of things.
Right.
And then Katrina came along.
Sure.
So when Katrina shut down the Sanger, NOTA was shut down because obviously there was nothing, no funds to work with. But when we started back up, really it was about 2010, I guess. It took that long. We decided to become strictly a grant-making organization, and consequently, we do support the arts, as you said, all in a very broad way, a broad definition of the arts.
Sure.
We support them with grants, 100%. Our income is distributed with zero overhead. We have a relatively small board. There's 5 of us. We do things like a secretary and a treasurer and that sort of thing. But basically, we're all volunteers. And so every bit of income we get from the Sanger goes back into the arts community.
So you're the recipient of whatever the profits are from the Sanger series. You get a chance to apply that back into those. Huh? What's that?
Yeah. A small portion of those profits.
A teensy-weensy portion of what they make at the Sanger. Okay, I understand that. And again, so you're essentially grant giving, but you do have to have, I assume, a pretty large chunk of money to start off with. And where did that original money come from? Was it
the money came from the Sanger? It was seed money, I guess, back in 1984.
I got you. So the Sanger has worked hand in hand with New Orleans Theater Association, and that also includes, I assume, the Mahalia Jackson, since they're sort of run by the same group.
Yes, it does. That's exactly right. Whatever parts of the Broadway series may be presented at the Mahalia, pardon me, whatever may be presented at the Mahalia is also inures to our benefit.
So again, I'm just going over the idea being that you're partners in a sense, sharing in the profits, and then
Hmm.
whatever money comes out, obviously you redistribute back into the community. And you mentioned Katrina. I know the Sanger was hit pretty hard. It did not come back, as you mentioned, for approximately 5 years. And when it came back, it was probably more glorious than ever.
Yeah.
In 2015, and I will just to be perfectly transparent, the New Orleans Theater Association was beneficial to the American Theater Critics Association, which I'm part of. We brought down close to 80 different critics from across the United States, and a few of them were spouses, so not all of them were exactly critics, but most of them were working critics from New York, from Chicago, from California, from Florida, from the D.C. area, from Texas, all of them, all over across the country, and they came and they reveled in seeing what we have here in New Orleans, but in particular on a rainy, I think it was perhaps Thursday morning in 2015. Maybe it was actually Friday afternoon around noon. It was starting to drizzle a little bit. I said, anybody, please take out some time, come away from your sessions, follow me from where we are. We were down at the Crown Astor. I said, please walk with me over to the Sanger Theater. You're not going to believe this place.
Good for
And
you.
all of these jaded theater critics who have been to New York many times over, who have seen many, many theaters, walked inside the edifice of the Sanger expecting to see some little podunk place, and their jaws dropped practically to the floor because they had never seen a facility
Ah,
as beautiful, and as gorgeous, and for the people from New York, as large in many cases as the Sanger Theater. And I love to mention the fact that the Sanger seats over 2,600 people, which is probably close to 700 seats more than the largest
yeah,
Broadway theater, which
yeah.
is the Gershwin. The Gershwin seats 1935, and the Sanger seats over 2,600 and plus close to 2,620 or something like that. So,
It's always surprising to a lot of people who visit New York and want to go to a Broadway play for the first time how small many of the theaters are.
yeah. But again, they do a lot of booking every night, booking every night, booking every night. The Sanger, let's face it, they have shows that come in, a run of Sangers, shows like Wicked or Hamilton. They may have sellouts, but for the most part, not every show that comes in nationally is going to sell out.
Sure.
And you're going to have 80%, maybe 90% fill. And that's still a good house for them.
Hmm.
And again, I'm not quite sure what the most successful shows for the Sanger have been. I suspect that Wicked 3 years ago was probably the one that still had the record until Hamilton, and I'm not quite sure if Hamilton beat him or not.
Pretty sure it did.
Yeah.
The ones you named were all of the blockbuster ones that you hear are obviously the ones that people do want to see, understandably.
Yeah. And again, not necessarily trying to put down Wicked. I think Wicked was in a chance to maybe take over Hamilton this year too, because they were really supposed to do a lot. And then look what happened.
Yeah.
Before we turned around, I mean, I did my review on Tuesday night, and Saturday afternoon, Saturday morning, whatever it was, late. The Hard Rock Hotel collapsed, and that was all she wrote. And then because due to, of course, all the other problems we've had here, with the pandemic, et cetera, we had another Broadway cancellation, several now. But a lot of theaters across the country now have realized a lot of shows that have closed. But at a point, New Orleans was the only one that had two national tour shows close,
Yeah.
within a few months of each other. So that was sort of a sad situation. And again, I really appreciate you being with us tonight. Again, let me find out what you're drinking tonight. What are you sharing?
My beverage of choice is a glass of water.
Gee, not even in a fancy glass. What is that, in a tumbler?
Yeah.
Goodness gracious.
I'm a very pedestrian type of guy.
All right, so for those of you who don't know, it's in a Sazerac glass, but it's not a Sazerac. It's very similar to a Sazerac insofar as it uses rye, but that's about where it ends. As I believe it's about, well, let's say 1 part rye, 1 part I'm trying to remember exactly what I put in exactly. It was one part
Vermouth.
rye, it was sweet vermouth, one part, and then one part brandy, and also about uh, maybe a third of a part of a
Benedictine.
Benedictine, which I then put over ice and then strain. Put a little. It's called a Vieux Carré.
Yeah.
Now, I also put a couple of bitters, dashes of Angostura, and also Peychaud bitters, and that's what you have there. So Vieux Carré is a New Orleans drink, and you said you never had one before.
I never did.
So they make a good one over the Monteleone, and hopefully you'll get a chance to check that out as well.
I'm there.
Now, in just a little bit, we're going to have one of the beneficiaries, if you will, of your largesse. But you've made 161 grants since 2011, and they total just a little under $2 million.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing when you
Yeah.
think about it. And again, can you tell me a little bit about the criteria? What's the criteria for people, who are looking for a grant? Because somebody say, well, $2 million, I'm going to get me a piece of that. How do they qualify for that?
Right. How they apply for that? There's a granting process. You can go to our website, NewOrleansTheaterAssociation.com. But what we are trying to do is support the arts as broadly as we can. There's no area that's out. We've supported a lot of jazz programs. We do jazz at the Sandbar, at the UNO, Nicola Dance. At Frenchman. We also support the Broadway Theater Connection, dance troupes, chamber music, classical music, and of course, theatrical productions. We do have a special emphasis towards all the performing arts, not so much the visual arts. But there are a lot of things that are aimed at kids. We like educational programs. We like helping schools. There's one program that I particularly am fond of because it teaches creative writing. It's called Playwright, play/write, put on by Goat in the Road.
I'm familiar with that, and it's young kids who actually write their own pieces, which are then later on performed, if I'm not mistaken, right?
It's performed by professionals, and the little kids who wrote a script get to watch it performed, and it's just terrific. It teaches them about the creative process and what all is involved in putting on a show.
Yeah, I mean that's quite amazing. And again, you might even have some budding playwrights or creative writers who are going to come out of that. So you're not only teaching them the benefits of their own imagination, the products thereof, but also teaching them, that from their creative mind, they can have something that comes out that's put into fruition that is a finished work. Now, again, they do need some help. The people that go to the road are the ones, I have to tell you, who really steer them and show them how to do certain things. And I'm sure that kids, being kids, would probably have a very active imagination. Why can't we have a volcano on stage spewing forth lava, etc.? But,
exactly.
But no, I don't think we're going to be able to do that. But maybe we can come up with something that will emulate that from afar. Or, we'll show smoke or something along those lines. I can understand that, and I understand that you've given out 16 grants so far this year, but you, of course, because of the pandemic and everything that's going on, you pretty much had to suspend everything. That's correct?
We did, and that really goes back to the fact that our sole source of income is from the Sanger. We get a portion of the profits of the Broadway series, and if there's no show, there is no profit to share. And as you pointed out, the pandemic shut down the Sanger, but we were already canceling programs because of the Hard Rock. So the entire season is gone. The way we approach this, well, for one thing, we suspended grants at least until September. Not any of the grants that we committed to. We're certainly flush as far as that is concerned. Anyone that we've made a pledge to or a promise to support, we're fine, and we'll continue doing that. But we're afraid, looking forward to next year, what is our income stream going to be? We really don't know. We can all be hopeful that the Sanger, it gets back on its feet quickly. But, as you know better than anybody probably, that it's not just the fact that the Sanger is not open. They could open tomorrow. Would there be any touring Broadway plays to come through? No, because pretty much every theater in the country has to be reopened in order to put together a tour.
Yeah.
And if that doesn't happen, then it'll be a while. That may not happen right away, but I'm very hopeful. I mean, the economy's looking good. The numbers are down on coronavirus so far.
Right.
So.
Right. Well, and again, some of the ideas for some of the you mentioned the Goat in the Road playwrights, etc. There's music, there's dance that you talked about. A lot of these programs specifically emphasize kids, which is so important to get them involved in the arts. One of the things that we are talking about these days is how to get kids involved in the arts. It's so important. I know back in the day, Wynton Marsalis used to emphasize the music in the schools, and how we should never ever lose the band programs that there are out there, because it's so important. And you also have given, I know, to the Satchmo Summer Jazz Camp in the past.
Yeah.
And the band instruments for people. I don't know. Do you do anything with the Trombone Shorty and his group, or is that is separate from you?
We have not. That's separate. Although we do support the internship program at Tipitina's.
Okay.
A couple points about what you were talking about, arts in the school. One program that we're really pretty enthusiastic about is by a group called Lyrica Baroque, and they go into classrooms and present very short pieces of classical music that is meant to evoke a certain emotion, either joy or sadness or whatever. The kids identify what that emotion is supposed to be and then write about it. And it's sometimes very hard to get kids to talk about their own emotions or to even face them. And that's a real interesting program. And the other thing I think it's kind of interesting about band instruments, the very first grant we made after the Katrina reopening was to buy a tuba for George Washington Carver High School. They'd been invited to the inauguration, and they wanted to go, but they needed a tuba because the one that they were using had duct tape on it and was packed together. And what are we going to do? We found out about that, called them up, and said, "We'll buy you a tuba." It was fun. It was a good thing to do.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned jazz, because we're going to talk about that in just a second. One of the members of the largesse, as I mentioned it, the beneficiaries of your campaigns to help out to improve the New Orleans area is Bethany. We're going to bring you in now, Bethany Bultman.
Hi.
And Bethany is with the New Orleans Musicians Clinic, correct?
Yes, and it's so nice to be able to thank you from the bottom of my heart for your very generous donation to the Musicians Clinic. We are so grateful.
You're more than welcome. It's an excellent cause, one we really believe in.
Well, I'll tell you what is a particular sadness to me. We're part of the International Performing Arts Medicine Association, and for years I wanted to bring it to New Orleans because I wanted our performers to be able to meet the experts from all over the world who had done remarkable things to make sure their health care was the best, and work with them in terms of the actors. And of course, I did get it accepted, and it was going to be here next week.
Oh,
so it's super, super sad. And one thing I want to ask you, we have international experts, particularly in Australia, who do wonderful things with performers having to do with mental health. And they would love to do more with our performers, and we can certainly do it via Zoom. It's just, how do we engage local performers who aren't already our patients to help them get through this particular crisis when they're not being able to perform? And it's a real question, because we've got the providers who want to do it, but how do we get particularly actors to engage with these providers?
Good question.
It's a very good question, and I certainly don't have an answer to it. But
one of our keynote speakers was going to be an intimacy coordinator from HBO. And the intimacy coordinators are so important in theater. And we were hoping she was going to come and be able to train local people to be intimacy coordinators. But in talking to her recently, they're expanding being intimacy coordinators to being virus prevention coordinators, because how do you do a love scene safely?
Right. Romeo and Juliet. Romeo.
I know. Like, how do you
take off that mask? Yeah.
So, we want to engage. I believe in what Rahm Emanuel says: never waste a crisis. Let's have conversations about how we can help. You talked about touring companies. Well, one of our funders is Broadway Cares Equity Fights AIDS in New York. And also the Actors Fund is one of our great mentors and supporters. And so we're trying to find a way to make sure that New Orleans is one of the first places that touring companies can come, and that we can make sure that they're in a safe environment when they come here. But the thing I'm hearing as we're having these conversations about what we can do and what our community can do and what our hotels can do is insurers are not so excited about giving the insurance money for a touring company, because if one person gets sick in New Orleans, everybody has to go into quarantine, and they're not excited about having them in Houston.
Understandable.
And that's a real barrier that we're looking at.
Well, there's a whole lot. I've already talked with a number of people about the social distancing and how we're going to do it. I mean, I actually posted on my own Facebook page what was a proposed situation with the social distancing of the seating, et cetera. And it's the emptiest house you've ever seen in your life.
Yeah.
And this is the way that we're going to have to come back slowly to make sure that we're operating safely for everybody, not only on stage, but also in the audience. But in addition to that, we're going to have to do it in stages as they proposed. So 25%, then to 50%, and eventually, hopefully, back up to 100%. And getting people to feel comfortable and feel safe is just as important as getting people to be safe on the stage. So there's a lot of questions. The Equity Union, I know, Actors Equity is very concerned about making sure that their people are provided for and that they're not left out to dry, so to speak, because you talk about one person gets sick, on a touring company, of course, but the same thing on Broadway as an example. If one actor comes down with some sort of a problem, they have to shut down the entire a Broadway show for 2 weeks, quarantine.
I know, like one time we got a call from Actors Fund, and they said, we have an emergency. I'm not going to name the show, but they just got to New Orleans. It's one of the first nights of the run, and 4 of the actors has the flu. Can you get a bunch of nurses to come down and give everybody flu shots. So we were trying to negotiate as they were doing costume changes to be giving people flu shots, because it was like, we don't know what we're going to do if anybody else gets sick. And we were thinking, okay, so we got a bunch of LSU nurses and we went backstage and gave flu shots.
I do remember that I was at the production they did not too long ago of Les Miserables, and there was a little boy who is supposed to, Gavroche, who's supposed to come out and pick up the bullets, etc. And he's got a little scene that he does first off, and then he comes out in I believe it's in the second act, and picks up the bullets, and they end up, not to spoiler alert, he ends up having a death scene, and everybody cries over this little kid. Well, he came out late, but if the kid that came out first was not the kid who came out second, he missed the bullet scene completely. And finally, at the end, the kid who took a bomb, we didn't know exactly what was going on. He had just come out of apparently what happened was the kid who got sick so quickly, he only had like 30 or 40 seconds. He says, I'm going to be sick. And he ran off. And that was it. I talked to one of the guys. He said, this is a professional kid. He says he's never had this happen before. But those things do happen.
Yeah.
It's you can't be prepared for it. Let's talk a little bit about the Musicians Clinic. Tell me a little bit about this. Mike, this is some of the benefits of what you provide them. And this is a group, I guess, of musicians at the clinic. Huh?
Well, this was, we wanted to show that we have all different kind of performers who use the Musicians Clinic, and that's the waiting room. Obviously, it was staged because we treat all performers. So it's both comprehensive health care and occupational health care. So we want to keep the musician healthy. We want to treat their chronic conditions like diabetes and asthma, but we also want to make sure that we can sustain them as performers, and that's where performing arts medicine comes in.
So how do you take care of people who have not had much of a medical health history in terms of being taken care of by a doctor, who have basically not taking very good care of themselves?
A lot of performers.
Yes.
That would be a lot of performers. And they will come in because they're losing their voice. And once we get them in, they have to have full blood work. We have this wonderful French nurse practitioner who is about 4 feet tall, and she just gets up in their faces and talks to them for sometimes an hour and a half. But it's looking at family history, looking at their environmental history, where they live now, what their concerns are. We have a social worker work with them. And then we have the 16 subspecialty groups within the LSU Medical School. So once we get the performer in, they have electronic medical records, and they can follow along on their cell phone with every test that they have, who their doctors are, and what's going on with them. And we find that once those performers come in, we have 2,600 patients now, and they understand that we're going to make sure that they are going to perform at their top capacity. But one of the barriers is going to be their diabetes or their asthma.
Right.
So, I mean, it's got to be, we'll help you with what you want, but you got to meet us halfway.
And I know that you had some people who were like in Dr. John's band who, were in really bad shape, not because of Dr. John, but just because they had never really had the proper.
Right. I mean, one of the members of Dr. John's band had terrific insurance. I mean, his wife worked for the government. He had great insurance, but he was terrified of the dentist. So he never, ever, ever went to the dentist. Well, they were in New York. Matt called me one day and he said, "Oh, something's the matter with Roscoe." That's what they called him. "Something's the matter with Roscoe. What do we do?" Well, it turned out poor Roscoe had stage 4 head and neck cancer. Ooh. And Paul Friedlander, who's an amazing doctor at Tulane, I said, you know what? The best doctor for that particular kind of cancer is actually in New Orleans. Get him home. And, sadly, after many surgeries, Herman did get to go back on the road a few times, but he did die of it.
Yes, he did. Yeah.
But as a result, I have to say that there were other performers who were his friends who heard about head and neck cancer. They'd never known about it, and they also didn't want to go to the dentist.
Right.
And a couple of people are walking around today because they did go in to see Paul Friedlander. It was diagnosed early, and they are fine today.
And I should also point out that there was one performer who did not take care of his teeth, and unfortunately had an infection that set in, and was on a tour, I think, in Japan.
In Japan.
And he sadly passed away from a simple tooth infection. Had he gone to the dentist, not just to a doctor, but taken proper care of his teeth, that he would have not had that problem and probably been just as much a necessary as anyone else. Yeah.
So I mean, we're all about prevention, and right now, what we are focusing on two things. One is convincing our patients that they need to stay home, that when they're not staying home, they need to wear masks because we want to keep them safe. And then the other thing we do is provide 3,500 meals per week so that people are fed. And we are delivering food and medicine to 100 of our more vulnerable patients. We have nurses who call them every week to check in on them, because sometimes the people we don't hear from are the ones that are the most in need. So we have done a bit of a pivot, but our patients can reach us almost 24 hours a day by telehealth. And we're hearing from a lot of people who really have a lot of concerns about where do they go get blood work, and where do they get an MRI? What do they do? So,
well, Bethany, I'm about to show a picture of some of the people who work on your team. But before I do that, I'm going to ask you what you bring in tonight to drink.
Oh, so I have been making fresh ginger, like an essence of it, and then I freeze it and make ice cubes out of it. And then I use fresh lime juice and then lime liqueur. And that is my nighttime sipping, healthy, delicious mocktail.
So it's sort of like a 7-Up / ginger ale kind of a thing, but without the fuzz, without the fuzz.
It doesn't have sugar in it because liqueur is just a flavored sparkling water.
Yeah.
So it's very gingery and very limey.
Well, I know that speaking of limeys, I know you've got a few Brits who come into the musicians clinic too.
Oh, yeah. We do have a couple of Brits. Yes. We do.
And now this is the people, I guess, who are in charge of actually taking care of.
These are, yes, this is our staff. This was for breast cancer awareness, and we have 4 members of our team who are breast cancer survivors, and then most of the rest of us either had mothers or grandmothers who had breast cancer. So that was just a picture we did in support of trying to get women to come in and get free mammograms.
Do I know where that picture was taken?
In the backyard of where our office is. Our clinic is on St. Charles Avenue, and this is in our house that Tennessee Williams wrote suddenly last summer about.
Right. Yes, that's right. So again, a lot of people don't realize the history of the house. Of course, we talk about the House of Bultman, as it were. I mean, I actually was privy to the fact they had apartments upstairs. People would live in the actual apartments. And of course, all of the other services that were being rendered for the public, for funeral services, et cetera, were downstairs. And people would live upstairs. And now, was that part where that area was also partly a stable at one point?
Okay, no. First of all, our house was the family home.
Okay.
And then they bought that in the 1920s. And then Johann, my husband's grandfather, bought 3 houses on St. Charles Avenue. and he shoved them together and made the funeral home there. But the original funeral, and I'll tell you this just because you can't make stuff like this up, and I swear this is the truth. Johann's great-grandmother had come from Alsace as a poor German immigrant with her husband to a Catholic place, and he died, and she was pregnant. And so the only place she could find to get a job pregnant and live was a livery stable. And her name was Magdalena. Now, this is where you just can't make it up. So she had her baby in the livery stable, Magdalena. And
Okay.
she continued to work there, and she got the bright idea that the German community were dying at alarming numbers of yellow fever, and they were renting horses to bury bodies. And she got the idea that she would open a parlor so that they could have wakes in the parlor. And lo and behold, she created the empire. This poor, widow woman. And she was the grandmother of Ruth Bultman, who was a Newcomb potter, the calligrapher.
Mm-hmm.
And then the great-grandmother of Muriel Bultman Francis, who was very involved in theater after she came back from New York. So Magdalena had quite the legacy.
And Michael, I know you were talking about Lyrica Baroque. There were a number of classical concerts that were given in the area that was in behind where the funeral home was. What was that? The
Well, that was a solarium, which behind that was Johann's grandfather built a solarium after he bought those 3 houses.
And that indeed Tennessee Williams sort of based.
No, it was our house.
Okay.
Tennessee Williams and my father-in-law is Fritz Bultman, the abstract artist. They were roommates in the Village in New York. And Tennessee Williams, this is a great theater story. Now that we have a
theater audience, go ahead.
We're here. The Ford Foundation gave Tennessee a bunch of money, and he didn't write the play. He spent it on boys and booze. And so back in the day, when you didn't do what you were supposed to do with Ford money, they sent a goon from Detroit to break your knees. So the friends in New York said, Tennessee, you better get out of town fast because they are going to kill you till you write a play. So they sent him down on the bus to live with Johann's grandparents in that house where our office now is on Louisiana Avenue. Right. And he had to stay upstairs until he wrote a play, and he wrote Glass Menagerie on the 3rd floor.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's a great story. All right. Well, listen, Bethany, I want to thank you for being here tonight. It's been wonderful. And again, anybody needs to know more about it, what's the website to go to for
It's the New Orleans Musicians Clinic. And we have a lot of fact sheets, evidence-based on our website for performers having to do with COVID, having to do with hurricanes. And we keep updating them all the time and working with experts that are both from performing arts medicine and also our colleagues at Johns Hopkins and Harvard. And, we're here for performers in our community because we gotta keep them alive to keep our culture alive.
And again, special thanks one more time to Michael Mitchell.
Michael, yes, thank you.
And the New Orleans Theater Association for their helping you do your job even better and helping to get the help out where it's needed. And again, thank you for being with us tonight. I do appreciate you coming by.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Okay. In the meantime, thank you so much. We're going to continue our conversation with Michael. Again, that's just one of the things that that you do, and again, I know that there are some people out there. I'm going to look to see if we have any comments. A lot of people are saying hello and watching, but we can actually if you go to StreamYard.com/Facebook. If you're on Facebook, it'll give permission to our platform to actually put your comments up. So if you haven't already done that and you want your name to be shown, instead of Facebook user, we can certainly look at you as a Facebook user, but we certainly would like to have you make. What's that?
Let me make a couple of quick points about our relationship with the Musicians Clinic that Bethany was just talking about. Their scope of services is very broad. Our grant was zeroing in on one aspect of that, and that is mental health services. And the point, not that musicians need mental health services more than anybody else, but it's an underserved problem throughout the country. But it brings up a couple of points. One is that NOTA likes to focus not on general support for any of our grantees. We don't want to respond if somebody calls and says, look, I've got this nonprofit and we can't pay the light bill. Well, too bad. But what we do want to support is particular projects, events, performances, festivals, that sort of thing. And so we took that one aspect of the Musicians Clinic that does so many good things and focused on it. And one reason we chose that is because of the leverage, which is another important thing to us. There is a Professor Rose who has funded a lot of the Musicians Clinic work, and he offered to match, or that fund offered to match whatever it was we were donating. So to leverage our money, we thought this is just ideal, and we like to do both of those things with our grantees. Focus on particular aspects of their programming and try to get our funds leveraged in some way if we possibly can.
And now you talked about the jazz, and Bethany did harp on a little of that. You also talked about lyrical baroque. Now, Sarah J. McMahon, who's a member of that group, was one of our guests not that long ago, and we appreciated her being with us as well. But she's part of that group. You also do the Crescent City Chamber Music Festival. That's correct.
Right.
And again, a lot of people don't recognize perhaps how far-reaching the New Orleans Theater Association is. I mean, you mentioned Playwright with Go to the Road, but you also do an annual reading that you sponsor with the Tennessee Williams New Orleans Literary Festival. And that's usually on the Thursday night of the festival. The festival usually opens up on Wednesday, and then the kickoff is usually a big event on Wednesday, and then Thursday is when the scholar conference gets underway, and a lot of the events start. And that Thursday night, they'll usually have a number of major stars, whoever it might be, who will take part in readings. Sometimes it's been somebody who we know of locally here, like Brian Batt. We also may have somebody like Thomas Keith taking part in that as well. And I would have loved to have had Thomas tonight, but I'm going to save Thomas for a later date. He's a fascinating guy and a world-renowned Tennessee Williams scholar, if not the foremost in the world. And he, of course, takes part in this and sort of takes charge of that whole program, doesn't he?
Yeah, he has a lot to do with it. Paul Willis and Tracy Cunningham are the ones that we deal with mostly on the Tennessee Williams Festival. But that tribute reading, we're noticed the sole sponsor of that particular program, and year in and year out, it's one of the most popular at the festival.
Yeah, and again, it's nothing like I don't know how to describe it. There's nothing like seeing a big name star, here in New Orleans, taking part in these readings, dealing with Tennessee Williams. Oftentimes, Tennessee Williams having to confront things that he's enduring while living here in New Orleans and writing about the travails he's having, etc. And these people coming in from Hollywood, they're coming in from New York or where have you. But it's just an amazing thing to see how much they enjoy getting into, soaking up the culture, etc.
2 or 3 years, Dick Cavett was the host of that, and did such a terrific job. Partly because he's got some great Tennessee Williams stories.
Oh yeah. Well, he did a if I'm not mistaken, I think it was ABC. He was on at the time, but he did one of these sort of a live to tape kind of a thing where they videoed Tennessee Williams like in a carriage, going around showing New Orleans, etc. And that house over there, etc. And he was giving the tour in the carriage. Yeah, it was pretty funny.
And according to Dick Cavett, he didn't know what Tennessee didn't know what he was talking about.
Yeah, well, that's correct. I mean, as it turns out, it's the whole thing of baffle them with what, just try to just, who cares? How are they going to fact check me?
Of course.
Fake news. So,
yeah.
But I do want to, before we round up, because we're getting close to the end of the night. See, I told you this would not go that long, and you said I don't know if I can go more than a half an hour. But you do some wonderful work, and one of the things that I really wanted to mention to people is that you're there for the benefit not of lining your own pockets or dealing with just a few people. I mean, you actually open up your grants to anybody who qualifies, and there's a lot of people who really do get benefit. I'm wondering, are there any specific, you mentioned Go the Road, are there any specific smaller theater companies that you work with that we might know of? Le Petit, one of them, right?
Yeah, well, we work with Le Petit. We work with Southern Rep, but there are some that are so small you would not probably have heard of them. Occasionally, we'll work with a particular playwright who's working on a play and needs funding, and if it meets our criteria, which is there's something innovative about it, or it's creative in certain special ways, we'll support that as well. We try only to support nonprofit organizations, and occasionally people are too new to have gone through the nonprofit qualifying, and so they get what we call a physical sponsor. Who is a nonprofit. But I'll tell you this, the smallest grant that I think we've ever given out was for a one woman play, actually, at the aquarium on Mike Fink. It was great.
Really?
It was terrific. It was a really, really small thing, but we made it possible, and the kids got to see it, and those sorts of things. At the other end of the spectrum, we've made pretty substantial contributions to UNO, for example, to create an artist in residence program and an endowed professorship of theatrical arts. So those are things that I don't mean this in a boastful way, but we are very proud of how much good we've done over the years in supporting the arts community.
Now, there was a project you did with the New Orleans Opera Association a few years back, and that was a children's opera, which was actually written in a concentration camp,
right?
If I'm not mistaken, and it was a children's opera that was then shown. And I'm trying to remember where they actually did the presentation, because it was an unusual setting, if I'm not mistaken, for the it was the World War II Museum.
World War II Museum.
Yeah.
Right.
Now that I think about it, it was an unusual setting, the World War II Museum, to have an opera presented, and the opera wasn't all that long, but the opera was essentially created by young people who were in the concentration camp at the time, back in the obviously in the Nazi era, and many of the children did not survive, and those that did, remembered this. And one in particular came here in New Orleans, and she had, I think, played the cat in the original production, and she came and watched a number of young people from New Orleans perform this, along with other members of the New Orleans Opera Association, principal roles, etc. And it was just an amazing thing. It wasn't that long, but very moving. And sadly, the lady who was a survivor passed away about a year or so ago. But it was a very moving performance, and you had contributed to that.
We had, and in fact, even just concentrating on operas for a second to show you the breadth of what we do, we supported an opera about E.E. Cummings and Jackson Pollock that was presented at the Fringe Festival, and it was like a 4-person opera. And at the other end of that spectrum, we supported the opera Freedom Riders, which was presented at Longview. It was a very well received, very well performed opera. In both cases, they really were.
And again, just a tribute to all that you end up doing throughout the year. And again, once the Sanger opens back up, and I know we're going to be looking forward to that day, but once the Sanger does open back up, hopefully we can get more people in to start seeing shows, and then knowing that they'll be supporting your efforts, that whatever it takes to get them to get back in the seats and for them to buy another ticket, that ticket will actually not just go to the Sanger, but the proceeds will also go in part to you, which will then be brought back to the New Orleans community via these grants. And, so again, I want to congratulate you for all that you do. Again, Michael, and again, all the people involved. How many people do you have on your staff or with your group?
5.
That's it, huh?
The board is the staff.
Gotcha. So, and you're a retired attorney now. Are they all retired attorneys, or are they
No,
come from all walks?
no, it's pretty diverse. In fact, I live in New Orleans, as does Lake Douglas, but nobody else does. Lake is a professor of landscape architecture at LSU. Kirk Feldman is a show business professional, used to be a part owner of the Sanger, lives in San Antonio. Angie Gates used to be a general manager at the Sanger, but she's now in D.C. working for the mayor. And Eric Hess is in Shreveport and has an art studio where he does works of art with glass. It's very spread out and very diverse.
Pretty amazing. And again, the New Orleans Theater Association doing some great work. And Michael, I want to thank you for being with us tonight. Again, we were a little late getting you in there, but NOLA Theatre Talk. Again, we got just. I'm going to go a little bit over tonight because we did start a little bit late. But again, those of you who are out there, check to see if there's any comments to check out. But this is broadcast live stream to the NOLA Theatre Folk Facebook group, and also to the theatercriticism.com Facebook page. And now Facebook's page is for promotion of theatercriticism.com. I keep telling people, don't go to theatercriticism.com. That's a website I created, but it's only for theater reviews. I hopefully will have some reviews coming up soon from some of the reviewing things that I've seen online, which, may as well do something the way things are going. And we also should point out the fact that I now have a YouTube channel. And for those people who are not on Facebook, they now have a way to go on YouTube and to be able to see all of the various interviews that we've done and conducted. I should tell you the piece that we did with Michael McKelvey a week ago, and the piece that we did with Janet Shea. Both of those are now on the YouTube channel. So if you're not on Facebook, you say, I don't go on Facebook, I don't believe in them, whatever, fine. You can go on YouTube and you can still see all of those shows. And unfortunately, all the shows that we've done prior, I had a little trouble getting YouTube to kind of connect with our platform here, but it has apparently passed muster now, and the YouTube gods have said it is so, and we now may live stream here and then upload to them, and we're hopefully going to have all of the remaining shows that we do from here on out that will be loaded up there and basically available within a few hours of their broadcast and live stream. So again, Michael, just as we're wrapping things up, I just want to thank you for all that you do. Again, the fact is that if we don't have people like you taking care of our new generation of youngsters coming up and experiencing theater or experiencing the arts in some way, whether it's perhaps through music or dance, perhaps through being exposed through some of the projects that you have, which involve them in the outdoors. Anything like that gets them going, we do appreciate. And again, obviously, there are a lot of grants that you give to people like the Musicians Clinic. We mentioned, of course, Bethany Bultman, who was on earlier, but there's a whole lot that you do. And I thought that, you don't get mentioned all that much. You should.
Right.
And again, for those who are in the know, they know what you do, and those that don't now possibly have a little bit better understanding and appreciation for what it is that you do. I want to thank you for being with us tonight. Again, a big kudos to Michael
Good.
Mitchell and the New Orleans Theater Association. And again, you have a wonderful night, and thank you for being with us. I do appreciate your time tonight. Okay. All right, and take that.
It was a pleasure.
Take a glass of water with you and go make some ice with it or something. Okay. Okay.
I'm gonna put it in.
All right. Take care of yourself. All right.
Okay.
All right. Bye now. All right. Mike Mitchell, again, we want to thank you for being with us. Again, I want to thank everybody for being with me and standing with me tonight, even though at the beginning we had a little bit of a little hiccup getting Michael in the room, but we did get him in fairly quickly. We are getting ready to wrap up the broadcast right now for tonight. I want to remind everybody that we do have a very important discussion coming up this Friday night. I wanted to take time out to talk about that. We here in the United States have been facing a lot of questions pertaining to the Black Lives Matter movement. We have been dealing with trying to get more people of color involved in theater, involved in the arts. And one of the ways that we're looking to do that is to get more people involved in theater. One of the groups that's doing some work in that behalf is the American Theater Critics Association, of which I'm a member. They have started up a committee on diversity and inclusion, and the chair, or at least the co-chair of that, Kalindra Smith from Atlanta, will be in our NOLA Theatre Talk show for this coming Friday night to discuss diversity and inclusion, how we can get more people of color, people who are LGBTQ involved more in theater and be accepted as such, and also to deal with a lot of other issues. Again, we'll hopefully see you there. That'll be this Friday. And then next Monday, a week from tonight, we're going to have a wonderful get-together of music directors. I believe that's the 15th coming up of June. Music directors from across our local community who will be talking about what music directors do and how they enhance a musical theater production. And not to forget, we will have Brick, a live stream reading on the 22nd of June, and then John Bigonet's live stream reading of Rising Water on the 29th of June. Again, for NOLA Theatre Talk, this is Alan Smason, and I'll see you at the theater.